The Antichrist. A single figure so evil, so powerful, that he will deceive the entire world and bring humanity to its knees. He'll mark every person on earth, establish a global dictatorship, and wage war against God himself. At least, that's what you've probably heard. But what if I told you that the word Antichrist appears exactly 0 times in the book of Revelation? What if the Bible's most famous apocalyptic text never even mentions this figure that we've all heard so much about? What if everything you think you know about the Antichrist is based on a centuries-old misunderstanding? For centuries, Christians have tried to identify this mysterious figure, pointing fingers at everyone from Roman emperors to modern politicians. But here's the thing. Most of what people think they know about the Antichrist doesn't actually come from the Bible. In this video, I want to strip away the Hollywood dramatization and popular misconceptions and explore what the Bible actually says about the Antichrist, because the truth might surprise you. Ask most people what they know about the Antichrist, and you'll probably hear the same story. A charismatic world leader will rise in the end times, create a one-world government, force everyone to take the mark of the beast, and rule with an iron fist until Jesus returns to destroy him. That image comes from movies like The Omen, books like Left Behind, and even video games that mix theology with imagination. But most of it doesn't actually come from the Bible. If you search for the word Antichrist in Scripture, you'll find it mentioned only a few times, and never in the book of Revelation where most people expect it. So where did our modern idea of the Antichrist come from? The beast, the mark of 666, and the global dictator are never actually called the Antichrist in the Bible, which raises an important question. What does the text really say? Let's start with what the Bible explicitly tells us. The word Antichrist appears exactly 5 times in the New Testament, and all of these instances are found in the letters of John. Not the Gospel of John, mind you, but the shorter epistles known as 1 John and 2 John. And what these passages describe is quite different from the popular image of a single, all-powerful end-times dictator. In the first letter of John, we find this warning: "Children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, so now many Antichrists have come." Notice something important here? John doesn't speak of one Antichrist, but many Antichrists. He's not describing a future world leader, but people who were already active in his own time during the 1st century. So who were these Antichrists? John explains further. "They went out from us, but they were not of us. For if they had been of us, they would have continued with us." He's talking about former members of the Christian community who had left and were now teaching what John considered to be false doctrine. In another passage, John clarifies exactly what makes someone an Antichrist. Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. This is crucial. According to John, an Antichrist isn't necessarily an evil political leader or a supernatural demon. It's anyone who denies that Jesus is the Messiah or teaches false things about Christ. John even uses the term in his 2nd letter when warning against false teachers. "For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the Antichrist." The picture emerging from these passages is quite different from popular belief. John is addressing a specific theological concern of his time: people who were spreading what he viewed as heretical teachings about Jesus. To John, the threat of antichrists wasn't some distant future apocalyptic scenario. It was a present danger to his community. Now, if the actual word Antichrist only appears in John's letters and refers to false teachers, where does the modern concept of the Antichrist come from? Well, over the centuries, theologians and Bible interpreters have connected John's antichrists with other mysterious figures described in biblical apocalyptic literature. Let's examine these connections. Perhaps the most famous connection is with the beast described in the book of Revelation. This is the source of much of our popular imagery. In Revelation chapter 13, John of Patmos, writing decades after the Apostle John's letters, describes a terrifying vision. "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. This beast is given power to make war on the saints and to rule over every tribe and people." It's also associated with the famous number 666, described as the number of the beast and the number of a man. The text continues, "And it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark." Here's where it gets interesting. Many modern readers assume this beast is the Antichrist. But notice something. The book of Revelation never uses the word Antichrist. Not once. This beast is simply called the beast. So why do people connect them? Because both represent opposition to Christ and his followers. But are they the same figure? The Bible doesn't actually say so. In fact, scholars have long debated what Revelation's beast actually represents. Many historians believe it was a coded reference to the Roman Empire, which was actively persecuting Christians when Revelation was written. The 7 heads might represent 7 hills of Rome. The number 666 could be a reference to Emperor Nero, whose name in Hebrew numerology adds up to 666. Early Christians would have understood these symbolic references, but they were veiled enough to avoid direct Roman censorship. Another figure often identified with the Antichrist appears in Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians. Here, Paul describes someone he calls the man of lawlessness, or, in some translations, the man of sin. Paul writes, "Let no one deceive you in any way. For that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God." This passage has fueled countless theories. Paul describes someone who will commit the ultimate act of blasphemy by declaring himself to be God and taking his seat in God's temple. The dramatic nature of this prediction has led many to connect this figure with the Antichrist. But again, Paul never uses that term. He's describing the man of lawlessness. And importantly, he seems to suggest this person was already being held back by some restraining force even in his own time. What's particularly interesting is that Paul tells the Thessalonians that they already know what's restraining this figure. And you know what is. Restraining him now so that he may be revealed in his time. Unfortunately, Paul doesn't spell out what he means, probably because his readers already understood the context. This has left modern readers to speculate endlessly about what or who was holding back the man of lawlessness. We should also mention the prophet Daniel, whose visions in the Old Testament have been interpreted as predicting a final evil ruler. In Daniel chapter 7, the prophet describes a vision of 4 beasts representing kingdoms. From the 4th beast grows a little horn that speaks boastfully and makes war on the saints. Later, in chapter 11, Daniel describes in detail a king who will exalt himself above all gods and speak terrible things. These passages in Daniel were likely referring to historical figures like Antiochus Epiphanes, a Greek ruler who desecrated the Jewish temple in 167 BCE. But they've been reinterpreted by many Christians as prophecies about a future Antichrist figure. So we have John's Antichrists, Revelation's beast, Paul's man of lawlessness, and Daniel's little horn. All separate figures described in different books by different authors in different time periods. None of them are explicitly connected in the Bible itself. So how did they all get merged into the single figure we call the Antichrist today? This transformation happened gradually over centuries of Christian interpretation. Early church fathers began connecting these various passages, seeing them as different descriptions of the same ultimate enemy of Christ. This interpretive tradition grew stronger in the Middle Ages, when apocalyptic expectations ran high and people became obsessed with identifying the Antichrist in their own time. During the Protestant Reformation, this interpretation took on new dimensions. Protestant reformers pointed to the Pope as the Antichrist, while Catholics made similar accusations about Martin Luther. This wasn't just theological debate, it was political warfare using religious language. Both sides searched the Bible for passages that could be interpreted to condemn their opponents. By the time we reach the modern era, all these separate biblical figures had been thoroughly blended in popular imagination into a single composite character, the Antichrist, a final world ruler who would possess the characteristics of John's deceiver, the power of Revelation's beast, the blasphemy of Paul's man of lawlessness, and the tyranny of Daniel's little horn. But here's the critical point. This synthesis isn't found in the Bible itself. It's a theological construction built over centuries of interpretation and speculation. The Bible presents us with multiple figures who oppose God and persecute the faithful, but it never explicitly states they're all the same person, or that they all point to one future individual. When we read what the biblical writers actually emphasized, a different picture appears. John's letters warn about false teachers within the Christian community, not a distant future ruler. His antichrists were former believers who denied the truth about Jesus. Revelation, most scholars agree, was written to encourage Christians suffering under Rome. The beast from the sea symbolized imperial power, not a modern dictator. Paul's man of lawlessness may have referred to a real situation in his own time, something his readers understood, but history has forgotten. In other words, much of this apocalyptic writing spoke to the struggles and persecutions of the early church. These texts looked toward Christ's return, but their focus was never just one future figure. Does this mean there won't be opposition to Christ and his followers in the future? Not at all. The Bible consistently warns about deception, persecution, and tribulation. But perhaps we should be cautious about confidently identifying specific individuals as the Antichrist or predicting exactly how end times events will unfold based on our interpretations of these complex, symbolic texts. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this one. If you like this video and want to see more, why not subscribe? Anyway, I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.